As human beings, we are naturally impatient. And it is natural for an artist to want to implement some grand gesture that's going to have an instant impact on building your art business, increasing your sales. While there are certainly some actions we can take that will have a fairly dramatic impact, like increasing the amount of exposure that our artwork is getting, it's my experience that the art business is much more about incremental activity, implementing actions that we apply steadily over time that will tend to build our success. I'm Jason Horsch, owner of Xanadu Gallery in Scottsdale, Arizona, and publisher of Red Dot Blog. And today, I want to talk about some of these incremental activities that we can engage in. I would liken this a little bit to a snowstorm. Snow doesn't all fall from the sky in one instance and pile up on the ground. Instead, there is a steady millimeter by millimeter accumulation over the course of hours and sometimes days that steadily builds into snowbanks and drifts. Over the last 30 years, I've seen the same thing in the art business. While there can certainly be times where the snow is blizzarding and accumulating quickly, in the end, it's the steady application of effort that ultimately builds our success. And this can be a bit frustrating. It requires a lot of patience. But with that in mind, that it's going to take time and slow and steady effort, we'd better get started now. I'm always reminded of that old question, when is the best time to plant a tree? 30 years ago, but the second best time is today. And that applies to us in the art business. We want to get started with those activities that are going to build over time as soon as we can. And so if I think about the areas that an artist needs to work on steadily, I can suggest several key areas that we should be focusing on consistently and regularly to be building our business for the long term. And the first is building inventory and improving quality. This is the obvious one, and it's the one that you're most naturally inclined to work on. But I have found that successful artists are those artists who are consistently and constantly in their studio creating artwork. They're focused on the quality of that work. They're focused on creating a consistent body of work. And as you do this, it is going to cause you to start to build inventory. Now, many of you have already been building inventory, and you will soon run into a problem, and that is that you don't have anywhere to put all of that artwork that you're creating. And of course, the answer to that is that we need to be working to get the artwork out there in front of potential buyers in art shows and festivals, studio tours, and ultimately, hopefully, in galleries so that we have an outlet for all of the inventory that we're creating. And so I suspect this is not one that I need to spend a lot of time focusing on, but I would say that all of us can do better at being more organized and consistent in the time that we are spending in the studio. Now, the next step that we want to be working on consistently is building a following for your artwork. I've spoken in previous videos about the importance of building exposure, having more people see your artwork. Well, the second part of that is that we want to capture as many of those people who are seeing your artwork and bring them into your fold. Get their contact information so that we can be in touch with them repeatedly about your work. There's some real power in building a kind of relationship with a potential buyer and allowing them to have repeat exposure to your artwork. Developing and cultivating an email list is the most obvious way to do this. This email allows you to stay in direct communication with your followers. You control the platform, the communication, and email tends to get more attention than some of the other platforms that we'll also talk about. And so I recommend, if you don't already have an email list, get one set up today. And there are a number of different services available. You could set one up simply by collecting email addresses and keeping them in an address book and then sending out emails from your regular email service provider. But there are a lot of services, many of them offering free options that will allow you to manage your email list more proactively and send out your newsletters to that list. And so services like MailChimp or Constant Contact or any of the other myriad of available platforms are a great place to start. Social media is the other obvious way that we can build a following. We don't have quite as much control either over how the platform evolves or how our followers see our post. But there is no doubt that social media has become a very powerful communication avenue And we use it in our gallery. I use it personally. And even though it has a lot of flaws, the nice thing about social media is that it's very low friction. It's much easier for someone to just click a follow button and then to see your post than it is for them to commit to give you an email address. So I'm going to suggest that you do both of those things, have an email newsletter list and also a social media presence. Now, obviously, those tools are only effective if we are then staying in frequent communication with our followers. And so that's my next recommendation, that as we develop a list of followers and potential customers, we want to stay in regular communication with them. And so I want to suggest you get in the habit of sending out a frequent newsletter. My suggestion is that you send it out once a month. And this newsletter can start out very simple. You've got some very natural ingredients at your fingertips already. You are creating artwork, which gives you something to share regularly. You can simply post an image of the artwork, maybe write a short description about what inspired you to create the artwork, what's interesting and unique about it, and you can share any events that you're participating. And that's all your newsletter needs to be. And then send it out regularly. My recommendation is that you try and send out at least one newsletter per month. Likewise, with social media, you can be sharing images of your art, activities that you're engaged in. And for social media, I recommend you get in the habit of posting at least once a week to your art social media. This is going to be different than our personal social media typically. We're going to set up a business page for our art and then post to it at least once a week. And ultimately, you could build into 2 or 3 times a week. But get in those habits now. Even though you may only have a small following at this point, it's the habit that's important. And as your list grows, it will become more and more effective. We do this at Xanadu Gallery, and I will admit that early on, it would have been easy to get frustrated and give up because with a small list, you're not as likely to see the result. But what we have found is that by staying consistent and by frequently communicating with our followers over the course of years, we're now to the point where we will get regular sales from our activity on our email newsletter and social media. Not every single communication that goes out leads to sales, but enough of them do that it has confirmed the fact that it is an incredibly valuable tool for us. And then finally, we want to begin focusing on building strategic relationships. All business is about relationships, but the art business in particular will benefit by building long-term relationships. And there are several different key demographics that we can be building these connections with. First and foremost would be with your fellow artists. It is powerful to have relationships and friendships with other artists. They can help encourage you. You can help encourage them. But having that network can also make you aware of opportunities. It's a place for you to share knowledge and information, and that network can help you build on your success over the long term. We also want to build long-term successful relationships with our collectors. And so while our newsletter and social media efforts can be a good way to keep on their radar and stay in touch, I also want to suggest that you do personal outreach to your collectors on a regular basis. I would recommend that you work on spending 5 to 10% of your total available art business time on relationship building. And so for every 2 weeks that you are working in your studio, one of the days of those 2 weeks should be spent on building those relationships. And I'll have some videos coming up about how we might better and more effectively approach galleries, what we can be communicating with collectors about. But there's just no doubt that those efforts to build those relationships in the long term will be critical to your future success. Your best potential future buyers are your existing collectors. And so spending time in personal communication with them can be very powerful. And likewise, your galleries are going to be a conduit to an almost limitless supply of potential future buyers. And so we want to be putting effort into getting ready and prepared to approach galleries and building relationships with them. I encourage you today to begin working on these key areas, becoming systematic in your artwork production, on the quality improvement of your artwork, on building a following and then staying in touch with that following, and on working on your relationships. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe for future videos, and be sure to hop over to red.blog.com to sign up for my free newsletter for additional information on building your art business. Look forward to seeing you in the next video.